Hello friends, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you are new here. My name is Lori Beth, and today we are going to talk about a bunch of books that I want to read in 2024. So I was going to go about this video in a couple of different ways. I was going to do the 24 books I want to read in 2024, and I was like, I don't know, that's like a lot of books to go through. Top 10 books that I want to read in 2024, and then I couldn't narrow it down to 10. So instead, what we're gonna do is just a bunch of books that I want to read in 2024. No number. I don't even know how many I'm gonna end up telling you about. So we're just gonna fly by the seat of our pants, but we are gonna jump right in. So first up on the list is Evocation by S.T. Gibson. This is probably one of my most anticipated reads of the year. I read A Dowry of Blood last year and absolutely fell in love with this author. Her writing was just so poetic and so gripping that I can't wait to see what else she can come up with. So this follows a main character who grows up in sort of like a cult under the leadership of his father. But once his father passes away, he lives a normal life as an attorney and then does some moonlighting as like a medium or a psychic at night. What he doesn't know is that there was some kind of deal made with the devil, either from his ancestors or his father, and now the devil has come to collect on this price that has to be paid. The only person he feels like he can go to for help is actually his ex-boyfriend, who is technically a rival to him at this point, and his ex-boyfriend is now married to a woman. I think in this book, it's going to be very exciting to see how she takes this dynamic of like an ex-boyfriend, and his new wife, and them trying to solve this problem to save the main character while they have to navigate maybe their feelings and emotions for each other. She has this ability to kind of weave together human emotion while also giving a solid plot line and a storyline of characters trying to resolve a major issue. So I'm very excited for this one. I can't wait to get my hands on it. Next, we have The Atlas Six. So the first book, and hopefully the entire series for me this year. This is written by Olivia Blake, and this is kind of like what has been described to me as another dark academia series, but with magic. So one of the things I love about dark academia books a lot of times is they have that magical realism narrative, and I love the blend of feeling like you're in the real world that exists with magic in it. So the premise of this story is that it's like every 10 years or something, 6 candidates are chosen to be accepted or initiated into this Alexandrian society of magical academics. Throughout the year, they are going to have to prove as to why they should be officially initiated into the society. And although 6 are chosen, only 5 will be initiated, meaning one of these candidates will have to be eliminated. I love the premise of this book, and I also recently fell in love with Olivia Blake's writing. If you didn't catch my January wrap-up where I read Alone with You in the Ether, I went into how much I ended up loving that book and her writing style. I know there are a lot of mixed reviews on the Atlas Six, and I don't know if the writing style is different from something like Alone with You in the Ether. It's such a different type of story, but I fell in love with her writing in the one book that I did read, and I'm excited to see what she can do with a larger novel, something more fantasy-based as opposed to just like literary fiction. So this is very high on my list to read. I know I'm like years behind the game at this point, but it will be a priority for me to read this year. And next is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I have heard nothing but rave reviews for not only this book, but the entire series. So I am going to say that I want to start with just the first book at least, hopefully continue the series on throughout the year of 2024, but I am going to prioritize reading book number 1. So this book follows our main character, Gideon, who is a swordswoman in the 9th house. So now the Emperor has invited all of the heirs from the houses to fight in these trials where at the end, if they succeed, they will become immortal or become necromancers. However, to do so, this character, Harrow, is going to need the help of Gideon. And it sounds like Gideon is kind of tired of this role world that they live in. She doesn't want to do this stuff anymore, doesn't want to be a swordswoman anymore, but she's maybe roped into helping Harrow throughout these trials because in order for Harrow to become a necromancer, she is going to need the Sword of Gideon. It's also been described as like a really good blend between sci-fi and fantasy, and if I'm being honest, I have brought this up to my husband as a suggestion to read, like a buddy read together. Him and I will do that from time to time, and it's been a while since we've done it because we're always trying to find a book where we can like, you know, settle upon that we both enjoy. I'm a huge fantasy reader, he's a sci-fi reader, and I was like, I think I've got the next book for us to buddy read. I think that it is full of witty banter. The characters are super enjoyable. I've heard that as the series goes on, you get to break it down into more of each character, but I've also heard that the magic system is just super fun. Necromancy in general is kind of a really cool thing to read about, and I'm interested to see how this author creates a world like that. And also just the relationship that builds between our main characters, Gideon and Harrow. I've heard nothing but good things, so that one is really high on my list as well for 2024, and I can't wait to read it. Next is Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and this is Ali Hazelwood's first go at a fantasy slash paranormal slash romance. If you have not read an Ali Hazelwood romance before, I cannot recommend them enough. Those books at multiple times have gotten me out of reading slumps, and they were such enjoyable romances to read. Like, how do I describe them? They are contemporary romance, but they are so relatable and so real, but also very heartwarming and very charming at the same time. And Ali Hazelwood is just smart, and you can see that come forward in her writing. So I'm really excited to see how she is going to come forward as an author in the paranormal fantasy slash romance genre of things. In this book, we follow a main character who is the daughter of the head vampire, and she seems like she's been kind of out of the vampire world, like living among humans, trying to keep everything on the down low that she's a vampire and kind of live this low-key life. So she has been summoned by her father to come back in this world to carry on this peacekeeping alliance that the vampires have with their mortal enemies, the werewolves. So now we have the daughter of the vampire lord and the alpha of the werewolf pack that are going to be forced into this arranged marriage. So the book sounds like it's going to be very much clearly enemies to lovers, which is a trope that I always love. It's going to have a little bit of like political intrigue because now you're talking about marrying two different houses or two different worlds together. And also Ali Hazelwood is just so good at writing romance. So I think this is going to be really fun, as it's not just going to be a romance, it's going to have all those other elements, right? I honestly can't wait to see how she is going to do in this fantasy setting. Next on my list is Better by Far by Hazel Hayes. This is a contemporary fiction novel, and I read Hazel Hayes' debut novel, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. That book was called Out of Love. It was technically a love story, but it was a love story written in reverse. So it started out with this couple that had already broken up, and you follow their relationship backwards. You already know at the beginning of the book how things are going to end for them, but then it was such an interesting experience going all the way back and almost like a reverse love story, seeing all the things that they went through and all the little things that started to push them apart and the things that brought them together in the first place. And so the book actually ends with them together. It was such a phenomenal story. I thought her writing was just so lyrical. It's one of those books where you didn't feel like you were fighting to read it, like you were just in it, if that makes sense. You know, sometimes you're reading a story and you have to like very consciously fight to make it through the story. That book was not like that at all. So with her new book, this is going to surround a couple who has also broken up, and they are now trying to figure out how to divide their lives. So they have to stay in this place that they rent until the lease is up for another like 3 months. They have decided to stay there on and off, so one will be there for 1 week and the other will go somewhere else, and then vice versa. They're living in this limbo space of trying to figure out who they were and who they want to be, and navigating that while they're still kind of semi-sharing a space and probably having interactions with each other that you wouldn't normally need to keep having if you could fully separate from the person that you weren't with anymore. So to me, it sounds like another navigation of probably a messy relationship, a messy situationship, I guess, if you want to say that. Again, her first book was just so immersive for me, and I think this is going to be very similar. It's been, I want to say, like 2 or 3 years since I've read something by her, so I'm so excited to see another story come out by her. Taking a little tea break, having tea in the afternoon today, which is odd. I usually am a coffee drinker. I think I've said that like 800 times now, but also I am just enjoying this out of my little made in the Midwest cup, because what else is a Midwest girl to drink out of? So next up is The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. This is the same author that wrote House of Hollow, which I read in the fall of 2023, and it quickly became one of my favorite reads of the year and was the perfect tone to start my spooky season in 2023. The premise of this book, we are following one main character whose sister has been murdered, another main character who sounds like she has been cursed somehow, and a third main character who is an actual witch. So it sounds like the three of these girls are going to band together in some way to stop either these curses from happening or the killer from continuing his killing spree. Crystal Sutherland in her first book had this way of setting such a vibe of earthy, gothic, witchy writing. If you like either like a group of young girls that are witches or sisters that are witches, but they also have like this elemental aspect to them, meaning like the magic kind of involves like flowers and plants growing where things have died, or bugs and the earth and dirt. But it gives off the perfect like dark, earthy vibe that I absolutely loved in the fall. And I think that reading this early this winter while things are still kind of like dark and dead outside is going to be the perfect vibe for me. Next up on my list is Night Weaver by R.M. Gray. And I've never read anything by this author before, but what caught my attention the most about this book? Pirates. This story follows a main character who has been living in the open ocean for years after the Night Weavers have claimed land as their own and pushed everybody else out into the ocean. The story starts with our main character Violet's brother being murdered and her family being held captive by Night Weavers. So then the son of a wealthy Night Weaver offers Violet and her family employment as opposed to enslavement or captivity instead. So Violet starts to work as a housemaid at this Night Weaver's estate, and she has lived her whole life hating these Night Weavers and vows that she will never do anything but hate these Night Weavers. Of course, as time goes on, Violet starts to build a relationship with this male character who showed mercy to her and her family, and it sounds like she is going to seek him out to help avenge the death of her brother. This book sounds like such a perfect blend to me of atmosphere and enemies to lovers romance, kind of being torn between loyalty to your family and fighting for what's right. I have heard very good things about this book, and this will be yet another romantasy series that I start in 2024. Next up on my list is Come to the Lighthouse by Katherine Houghton. Keeping on trend with my desire for reading about the open sea, except this is a little bit more of that magical realism setting. So this follows a main character who becomes the lighthouse keeper to a lighthouse in Boston, and what she doesn't realize about this lighthouse is that it has the ability to time travel. Our main character, Adira, ends up traveling back to the 1700s where she winds up on this random pirate ship and discovers that she actually fits in quite well in their world. This strikes me as very much Outlander on the open sea, and I don't need much more information than that. Sounds like our main character, with her ability to time travel, ends up in this world she never thought she would be in, but kind of falls in love with someone there, while at the same time in her world where she came from has a childhood best friend that she has also been in love with her whole life. As things go, she is probably going to have to fight between the choice to either stay in this new world, or technically in the past, or go back to her previous world witches in the future and who she would like to be for the rest of her life. I have never actually heard of this author before. I think I stumbled upon this book on Instagram one day and I was like immediately drawn in by the cover of the book because there's this beautiful lighthouse and like these crashing waves. I don't know why, I just have this like overwhelming urge to read about water and pirates and oceans, and this being like a lighthouse keeper story I thought was so totally unique, and I can't wait to see what it's about. Next is The Girl from the Other Side, which is a manga series, and I have never read a manga series before. I've never even read a manga story before. So this popped up in a video from Ashley of Frolic Through Fiction that I watched quite a while ago, and when she went into the description of this, I thought, okay, that's something I could get on board with. So the storyline follows two kingdoms, one being the outside where a bunch of monsters and beasts roam and live, and then the inside where humans live. Somehow a young girl gets to the outside and she ends up befriending this monster on the outside, and they kind of go on this fairy tale adventure together. So it sounds like a very heartwarming story of a monster kind of caring and watching out for this little girl, and maybe this little girl teaching this monster things about humanity and human life. I thought it just sounded so lovely and so beautiful, and I have recently read my first translated book, and after reading that, I feel like the stories are just different. So reading something translated just hits differently, and if you've read anything like that, you know what I'm talking about. So it kind of opened my eyes to maybe stepping in the world of manga, which I know is a deep, deep well, and I am not that far into it yet. Like, I'm dipping a toe. Like, that's where I'm at. But this story sounded like something that I could just completely fall into, and it would be maybe a good series to pick up and read in between some either very heavy genres of books or something kind of dark and twisty. I think this will be just something like that will warm me from the inside out. Next up on the list, we have An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. Yes, another S.T. Gibson book. She is blessing the people with more than one novel release, and pretty early on in the year. An Education in Malice is another dark academia setting. However, this does have a sapphic vampire romance situation happening. I believe I've read that this is kind of like a Carmilla retelling or another story about Carmilla. So the setting of this book sounds absolutely beautiful. It's a private school somewhere deep in the hills of Massachusetts, and all of the students there, of course, are wickedly smart. And our main character, Laura, immediately upon arriving at the school, starts this academic rivalry with our other main character, Carmilla. So both Laura and Carmilla also drawn into this very enigmatic poetry professor that they have, and so ensues kind of this very weird love triangle between the three of them. So this has been described as a place that is not for timid girls. There are a lot of sinister political games at play, people that have secrets about other students, and kind of fighting for the top dog spot in that bloodthirsty academic setting. I love that this book blends not only the dark academia setting, but also vampires as well. It sounds like maybe you start to see some cult activity come into play as well in the school. I, again, loved her writing in A Dowry of Blood. It was just so poetic, and she can do something with a love story. So it does sound like another love triangle story, but there's something really dark about this one, especially with the emotions of some of these younger women. I think you're gonna see like a very heart-pounding storyline unfold. I am so excited for this one. And next on my list is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. If you are new here, you probably don't know my love for Leigh Bardugo. If you have been here before, you know that I could probably make my entire Bookstagram a stan account for Leigh Bardugo. I love her writing so much, and I am so excited for this book because it is a historical fiction book. Leigh Bardugo is going to take us back to Madrid, where we follow our main character, Lucia, who is a servant to this household where the mistress of the house sounds like she's kind of a sketchy character herself. The mistress of this house discovers that Lucia has these magical abilities, and when she discovers this, she decides she's going to use those abilities to better their family's social standings. So as she starts to come to the forefront, she has been taken notice by a sketchy secretary to the king who wants to then use her and her powers to help fight the Queen of England. Sounds like our main character went from just kind of trying to get by and do her day-to-day job as a servant in this house, and now she is being used to fight against another country. And along with this, she is thrown into all these different scenarios of blending the line of magic and fraud and good and bad. I am so intrigued by this because of the historical setting. I also know that Leigh Bardugo has a very quick-witted and very sharp writing style. So I think although we're going to see like a historical setting and this character that sounds like maybe she's kind of low in the ranks of society, she is going to be a very smart and brilliant woman, and she is going to know how to handle her own in this world. And as always, I don't know if Leigh Bardugo could disappoint me. She has not up until this point. I know this is going to be a different track we're taking here, so like that historical setting will be new for her, but I think she could do something really brilliant with it. And another book on my list is Feybound by Sarah El Arifi. I have heard very good things about this book so far. So I think coming off of the Crescent City Sarah J Maas high, this book could really scratch an itch of mine as the year starts to go on. So the story follows two sisters, two human sisters, who are exiled from their world and end up finding themselves in the world of the Fae, who have been non-existent for millennium at this point. So they didn't even realize that the Fae still were even a thing. So as per usual, when humans get thrown into the Fae world, it is very romanticized and very seductive, and they get very sucked into how the Fae live their lives. So it sounds like these sisters are going to be forced to choose where their loyalties lie between not only each other, but their homelands, and then what their hearts start to desire as well. I have not read anything by this author thus far. I have always heard good things. I think this is going to kind of give me something that I always enjoy reading in a fantasy, which is that human and fae involvement and the blending of the worlds together. I will always hold the series like ACOTAR so close in my heart, and I love seeing what other authors can bring to that type of fantasy for me. Like, I want to see something new or something exciting or something that I can fall into just as much as I did with that ACOTAR series. Last but not least on my list is The Pomegranate Gate by Ariel Kaplan. So I had never actually heard of this book before, but I discovered it through a Becca in the Books video where she was discussing how it was such an underrated fantasy series. It's another historical fiction novel, but also a fantasy novel where we see discrimination against Jewish peoples in a fantasy setting. So because we are in this made-up world, we see the queen of this world forcing all Jewish people to either convert or to be exiled. One of our main characters ends up fleeing her home along with thousands of other Jewish people. When she is separated from her caravan of refugees, she accidentally stumbles upon this magical pomegranate grove that transports her into a different magical realm. After our main character is lost on the other side of this new realm, our second main character comes in and is trying to save her or bring her back from this new world that she is living in. And our two main characters have to work together to unravel what it is that links these two worlds together. This book sounded so intriguing to me because not only is it a fantasy story, it is a historical setting. It blends folkloric history together, it has myth, it has magic, and it sounds like there will also be a romance that evolves from it as well. I do know that this is a series. I don't know how many books are going to be in that series. I know that at least 2 as of now are planned, but this one is currently out, and I am so excited to include this on my 2024 TBR. There you go, my friends. That is a bunch of books that I would like to read in 2024. We have quite a bit of fantasy on the list per usual, with a little bit of something else sprinkled in between. If you have read any of these books, I would love to know what your thoughts were on those books, or if any of these books are on your 2024 TBR, I would love to know that as well. I am going to link how to follow me on social media in the description box below. I am also going to link the video to my January wrap-up so you can watch me babble on about the books that I have already read in 2024. As always, it has been an absolute blast, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one.